that Mark has just explained.
Exactly, yeah, thank you.
So it's 3:16. What's next?
Well, should we do Raven or John Carter of Mars?
Whichever you fancy. Do you fancy a shout?
No, I'm not going to shout. No, it's just that. But well, let's do Raven and then let's do
John Carter now. Let's do John Carter next. John Carter, not of Mars, coming up in just a moment. Last week we had Andrew Stanton on the programme.
Yep.
The man responsible for Toy Story, because he wrote those, and he directed John Carter. Lots and lots.
I thought you were going to say Andy.
Wall-E as well. Yeah. Simon, I am a keen... this is from Darren. I'm a keen listener to your programme and the podcast. Even though as a foster carer specialising in the care of very young babies, neither me nor my wife has been to the cinema for several years. I enjoy Mark's rants and recognise that only someone who cares deeply about his subject can get so angry when he sees it done badly. Today I sat here trying to work out whether failing to pay the council tax this month would allow us enough money to pay the rent, and was listening to the latest episode. I am not naive about the realities of the cinema industry, but to hear a grumpy oaf whinge on about not knowing what to do if he was given only $5 million nearly made me throw my mobile phone, which I listened to the podcast.
You're not the only person who said that.
Across the room. Yeah. If you're able to do things you love and are given shed loads of money to do it, then the least you could do is to be happy about it. If anyone gave me $5 million, I know what I'd do.
Yeah.
Just one more before you tell us about it. Mark in Newcastle on I feel compelled to respond to Andrew Stanton's ludicrous comment that he only makes films for himself, not an audience, and that money or box office returns are not at the forefront of his mind. If this were true, why would he consent to changing the title so radically in order to appeal to a wider audience? Why go through the hassle and expense of retrofitting the film in 3D, if not to compete with all the other 3D films in the marketplace?
Exactly.
Does he expect us to believe that in making a film simply for himself, he happens to share the exact same tastes and expectations as a broad demographic of cinema goers in a variety of countries? Or could it be that every decision that he and his producers have made, from casting to script changes to vastly expensive marketing, have been designed to appeal to as many people as possible? With $250 million riding on it, I'd say the latter is more likely. We speak of John Carter.
So, just in case you're not aware of this, so the story is it's an adaptation of the Edgar Rice Burroughs series, from early 20th century. And the story, and it's really only worth doing a one-word synopsis, because beyond that, story is...
A one-word synopsis?
No, a one-sentence synopsis.
Okay.
The story is that you have a Civil War veteran who is out looking for caves of gold. He finds what he thinks is a cave of gold. Next thing he knows, he's beamed up to the planet of... Well, now, obviously, it's John Carter. Right? And the whole point about this is that we've been told by the marketing department that we're not allowed to tell you that it's John Carter and where John Carter goes to. But he goes into a cave on Earth, and you know what? He turns up somewhere else. Shall we hear a clip?
I think we should.
Okay.
Sun, then Rasu,
Mercury,
then Kosu,
Venus, then Earth, us.
that is Jasum. You are on Barsum, John Carter.
Good God.
So, now home is Jasum, and you came on one of your sailing ships across millions of carats of empty space.
No, not like that.
Go on. Shock me. How?
There's
Yes.
milk and chocolate and thick sugar.
So what we did there...
You beeped out the planet.
We beeped out the planet because we were so fed up with the whole idea. So well, look, you can hear from even that dialogue there that it is, dialogue that's full of Tharks, Zedongans, Bazooms, Heliumites, Nerfs, Smurfs, Niddly Fong, Daddly Bang, Biddly Bongs.
Nerfs and Smurfs might have been quite fun.
Nerfs and Smurfs are from The Lady in the Water. Remember all that? I'm a Nerf. I'm a Nerf. I'm a Nerf. Anyway, so...
I've had a Nerf.
And so we have to begin by saying that I'm sorry, the marketing department's decision to take the word Mars out of it it's utterly stupid. I'm sorry, there's no other way of looking at it. It's utterly stupid.
And at the end of the movie, there's a nice little iconic
logo
thing,
of John Carter,
and it's and it's J, and it's a C, and it's an M. John Carter's of Mars.
Now,
Fools.
The reason it bothers me is because. On the one hand, you had Anderson saying, look, I don't care about what anybody else thinks. The money doesn't matter. The fact that it cost $250 million, I made it for myself. Clearly, no great enthusiasm for doing 3D, but it had to be done in 3D. And you saw the film same as I did. Let's start by saying the 3D is rubbish, isn't it? The 3D is really Letraset kind of, it's Clash of the Titans.
Well, it's just pointless.
Yeah, it's viewfinder. It's real viewfinder. There's a little bit flat there and there's a little bit flat there. It's retrofitted. It is rubbish 3D. And I saw the trailer for it in IMAX 3D. And the 3D was rubbish then, and actually IMAX 3D tends to be infinitely better because it's to do with positive parallax. Anyway, but it was rubbish. So that, firstly, the title is rubbish. The idea that you can sit down with a focus group and say, take out Of Mars. Somebody said to me, are people really saying that if you don't say Of Mars, people will be more keen to go and see it? I think, no, actually, it's an entirely negative thing. They will be less keen to go and see it. They will be less, hang on. If you say Of Mars, they actively won't want to see it. If you just say John Carpenter, they won't actively feel anything at all. Because the idea that somehow people go, oh, John Carter, I wonder what that's about. And then when they're in there, they'll suddenly be bamboozled and go, oh, blimey, it's a science fiction movie and it's on the world of Barsoom. But actually, you know what? It's Mars. So, for a start, I really don't like this idea that you make a $250 million movie and you don't care when everything about the film, and as our listeners have already pointed out, everything's happening with 3D, everything's happening with the title, says, of course you're desperate to get the maximum possible audience in. It's not good enough to say some people don't like science fiction. There are massively successful science fiction movies out there that didn't get... I mean, Star Wars didn't get to be Star Wars by people going, George, you know what, it's great, but can you not just call it Brother and Sister?
But also, it just makes no sense because...
stupid.
Because...
stupid. Sorry.
But Avatar,
yeah.
I mean, clearly, whatever anyone thought about it, a fantastically successful film and some of the best 3D that anyone has ever seen.
Exactly.
So how can he... I just don't understand or believe the premise.
Now, that said, there are cases in which, the thing that Andrew Stanton said was, look, I don't care what anybody else thinks. The most important thing is that you make a movie for yourself. Funnily enough, I refer you back to the John Borman comment that in the end, a movie has a life and soul of its own. And, when everything is settled down, and this is what Andrew Stanton said, when everything is settled down, have you made a movie that people will want to see? Now, there are actually, for me, plenty of cases of people spending far too much money to make a movie which not enough people want to see for the movie to make its money back, so therefore it's an industrial mistake, but I'm really glad it happened. And the classic examples would be Howard the Duck. I like Howard the Duck, and I like it because it costs so much money and appeals to me, Tim Polecat, and 2 other people. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which did not make any... I mean, it lost something like it took half of what it cost, and of course you need to take twice. I really like the fact that Scott Pilgrim is as big and as boisterous and as noisy and as overinflated as it is, because I really like that film, and I know some other people who like that film, but clearly not mainstream. Clearly from a business point of view it was a mistake, but I'm really glad that film got made. There are other people who would argue, and I would disagree with them, but they'd argue it very passionately. One of them would be, for example, Philip French, that Heaven's Gate was worth the bath that United Artists took on it. That in fact, the fact that movie sank and didn't find an audience doesn't mean it wasn't a great movie. There are people who think that Heaven's Gate is a really, really great movie, despite the fact that it sank United Artists and it was completely trashed at the time by the critics. So, the problem with John Carter of Mars is not that it's a movie that isn't going to make its money back with the mainstream, that's going to not be able to find its audience because, on the one hand, the marketing people believe that the audience is stupid enough to be somehow swayed by the words Of Mars or Not Of Mars being in the title, or the 3D issue. The problem is it's not going to do well with the mainstream audience because it's incomprehensible, boring, turgid, dull, plodding, really risible, awful, thrangy throng in the hiddly bang diddly bong bong script, the kind of stuff that makes George Lucas's opening screed at the beginning of Phantom Menace really sound like Shakespearean sonnets or Chaucerian verse or T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. I mean, the way in which the dialogue plays out is so... The problem is not that, okay? Because there's no way the film is going to find a wide audience, because the audience who loved Star Wars, the audience that loved Transformers even, are just going to be, and I have this first-hand evidence. I have sat with an 11-year-old watching the 3D IMAX trailer for John Carter of Mars, and I said afterwards, you want to see that? He said, no. It's not that. The problem is that at the end of it, and I don't think it's any surprise to anybody to learn the movie is, but you watched, you fell asleep.
I did not fall asleep.
Okay.
Though you did lean over halfway through and said, I'm so bored. I was slightly more engaged than you were, but I agree, it won't find it. It just won't find its audience.
It's boring, isn't it? It's really boring. I mean, it is a film about
a guy... Why did you say I fell asleep when you know
I'm sorry, I thought you did.
Yes, no, I didn't.
No, okay, I'm sorry. I actually genuinely thought you did. It's a film about a guy who, what his superpower is that he can jump. It reminds you of Jack Nicholson being a werewolf in Wolf, and his wolfly stuff is that he trampolines his way around Los Angeles, okay? So the problem is not that. The problem is that the back end of that statement, as Andrew Stanton said, you have to have made a movie that after all the fuss has died down, and he seemed to me, and tell me that it felt the same to you, it seemed to me that he was on the back foot and he knew that the movie was...
I think that's why, well, we said on the programme last week, he was a little bit chippy, because I suspect, and I don't know that this is true, he had just been in front of a press...
He hadn't.
Big press conference.
He hadn't. No. Anwar Brett, who chaired the press conference, emailed me afterwards to say, I heard your interview, and just to confirm, he had not had a press conference in which he was given a hard time about the budget. That hadn't happened.
Well, okay.
And in fact, we didn't give him a hard time about the budget. What we said was, it cost $250 million and it's a 3D movie. 3D is in difficulty, and that's a massive amount of money. Is there any pressure on you? And he then reacted to the question by immediately saying, it's got nothing to do with it. In the end, what matters is I've made a movie for me, okay? I think there's no question that as far as a mainstream audience is concerned, the audience that embraced Star Wars, the audience that embraced all those other factors, they're just not going to be interesting because the storytelling is incomprehensible, the characterization is ludicrous, the film is 2.25 hours long, and it is boring, 2.5 hours
and
long.
The other thing, which is slightly unfair, is that it feels enormously derivative, even though in its original version, this story came before Star Wars.
But the film is enormously derivative of Clash of the Titans. I mean, that's the worst thing. Of the remake of Clash of the Titans, instantly. It feels like a little bit of Gladiator and a little bit of Clash of the Titans and a little bit of every other sword and sandals movie you see. I tell you what, it's a movie that makes Dune feel like something that goes with it. It makes Dune feel like Speed, okay? In comparison, Dune feels like a really linear ABC 1, 2, 3 bang, bang, bang narrative because it wibbles and wobbles and floodles and does all that stuff. Even when... Now, there's one moment in it when Mark Strong comes on, and Mark Strong suddenly starts pulling everything together, and there's this one brilliant little soliloquy that he does. Well, it's a soliloquy, it's a conversation, but he's him talking, and you think, this is it. The film's going to pull itself together by the strength of Mark Strong being a great screen presence. Then he's off the screen. The next thing you know, you're back to the Hoodle Foodles and the Smurfs and the Nifs and the... But the main problem is, it's not a personal movie. It's not a Scott Pilgrim. It's not a Howard the Duck. It's not a Heaven's Gate. It's not a movie which says, you know what, I know this film is going to die. I know it's not going to make its money back, but hey, I made the movie I wanted to make. It looks, and this is the worst crime, like a film that was made by committee, like a film that was absolutely was moulded by a group of people sitting in a room doing the maths. It's a film which title doesn't make sense because of advertising executives. It's a film which is in 3D because of sales managers and studio heads. It's a film whose narrative does not make sense to anybody who hasn't read all the books, and to people who have read the books, they'll just be going, why are you doing this to those books? It is a movie in which its extravagant expense actually becomes really tiring. Not just in a Cleopatra way. You know, for ages and ages, the whole thing was Cleopatra was the biggest money-losing movie of all time. In fact, it went into profit with the release of the video in 1982, 1983, something like that. But at least when you look at Cleopatra, you go, okay, fine, well, it was cut down from 2 movies, and that's why it doesn't make any sense. But there are spectacular set pieces in it. Even the set pieces in John Carter are boring. And it was a headache. It was a headache of a film, and it's not a personal. The defence for it is, yes, I spent all this money, but I made a deeply personal movie. And after all the dust has settled, you know, will we be able to sit down and go, I made a film that, you know, that I'm actually going to want other people to see? No. No, because it isn't a personal film. It's an ocean liner. It's an oil tanker. It's a behemoth. It's a huge, great, articulated lorry of a movie, lumbering from set piece to set piece like this in 3D, with people explaining the plot to you about, with the 4th Frang of the Fiddly Fong came from the planet Hrothgar Flom. And really boring, and really expensively boring.
Is it boring and expensive?
And not personal. What I would have given
okay.
to watch somebody spend $250 million on an utter folly, but no, to spend $250 million on something that looks like it's been focused group out of existence. It's really... Tell me you didn't like it either.
Your correspondence on John
No,
Carter...
tell me.
We've got lots of things to do.
Okay, but just tell me, you didn't like it, did you?
I liked it more than you, but I didn't think it worked as a film.
Were you bored?
I was slightly bored, but less bored than you.
Okay, and how long did I wait before I leant over to you?
You thought I was asleep, so frankly, your opinion is sort of slightly bereft of substance. Nick Partington says, as I was